Ever feel like you're just bombarded with information constantly, but you're still like, wait, I want to actually learn this stuff, not just have it fly through my head, you know?
Yeah.
So many of us wish we could learn faster, and that's what today's deep dive is all about.
Absolutely.
We're diving into Serena Kaylan's book, Science-Backed Methods to Learn Faster,
Good book.
to uncover how to really make learning stick.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff because most of us have this idea that learning is all about, some people are just naturally gifted or they have a high IQ.
Like you're just stuck with what you've got.
Exactly. But the reality is far more exciting than that.
Yeah.
It's about working with your brain,
Yeah.
understanding how it learns best, not trying to force it into some predetermined box.
So ditch the image of like a magic pill or something, because we're talking about training your brain like we'd train a muscle, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
It all comes down to those neural connections. Every time we learn something new, it's like forging a new path in the woods.
Oh.
And the more you walk that path, the clearer and easier it becomes to navigate.
I like that visual. That really helps. So if those neural pathways are like paths in the woods, then how do we clear those paths, so to speak? What does that actually look like in practice?
Active engagement. It's not just about passively taking information in, like that myth about highlighting or rereading notes a million times. It's about doing something with the information, actively using it. That's what strengthens those connections.
See, I'm definitely guilty of that passive approach. And unsurprisingly, I struggle with remembering things long term. It's like my brain has a delete button that activates after a test.
And that's incredibly common. Our brains are wired to prioritize immediate needs, but we can outsmart those tendencies a bit
Okay, how do we do that?
by understanding how our brains actually encode information for the long haul. And that's where things like spaced repetition come into play.
Okay, so before we get ahead of ourselves, let's define that. For those who haven't heard that term before, what exactly is spaced repetition?
Imagine reviewing information right at the edge of forgetting it. It's almost like giving those neural pathways a little nudge. Like, hey, remember this. It's important. Hold on to it.
Instead of that mad dash of cramming before a test.
Exactly, which we've all done, by the way.
Oh yeah, definitely not a stranger to cramming here. So we're talking about strategic timing of those review sessions.
Precisely. And it feels counterintuitive, I know. But spreading out your study sessions over time leads to much stronger and longer lasting memories.
It makes sense though if you think about it, like building any other skill, it's consistency over time, right?
Exactly. And it all circles back to this incredible concept of neuroplasticity. Your brain's ability to adapt and change based on how you use it.
Wow, so we're not just stuck with some predetermined learning capacity. That's really empowering.
Absolutely. That's what's so amazing about this research. No matter where you're starting, you have the power to reshape your brain and become a more effective learner.
And
And here's the best part. It's not just for academics. These techniques apply to anything you want to learn: a new language, a musical instrument, a new skill at work, whatever you're passionate about.
that's so encouraging.
Yeah, it really is.
So we're talking about like literally rewiring our brains, working smarter, not harder.
Yeah,
But how do we actually make that happen in our everyday lives?
yeah, that's the key,
Yeah.
right? It's got to be practical. One of the most effective techniques, and it's often overlooked, honestly, is retrieval practice.
Okay, so not just reviewing information, but actually trying to pull it from memory.
Exactly. Imagine you're like jogging on that brain pathway we talked about, but instead of a leisurely stroll, you're doing sprints. That extra effort, that struggle to recall, that's what really strengthens the memory way more than just passively looking over your notes again.
So things like flashcards summarizing a concept from memory, even trying to explain it to someone else, those all fall under retrieval practice.
Absolutely. All great examples. And here's where it gets even more interesting. One of the best ways to test if you really understand something is to try to teach it.
Oh, I like that. I've heard that before.
Right. It's the Feynman technique.
Refinement technique. That rings a bell. What is that again?
So you pick a concept and imagine you have to explain it to someone who knows nothing about it. Maybe a child or someone totally new to the subject.
Okay.
And the key here is you have to simplify it. Strip away any jargon, break it down into really clear language.
Because if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough, right?
Exactly. It's a great test to see if you've actually grasped the concept, and it forces you to really confront any gaps in your own understanding.
Love that. And it just makes it more approachable and less intimidating, I think.
Absolutely. And that's important because our brains thrive on novelty and engagement, which leads us to another powerful technique: multisensory learning.
Multisensory learning. Okay, break that down for me. What is that?
It's all about engaging multiple senses in the learning process.
Okay, so not just reading a textbook, but maybe I'm drawing diagrams or watching a video too.
Exactly. You got it. Visual, auditory, even kinesthetic if you can get hands-on and over. Each sense provides another pathway to the same information.
So the more pathways you create, the stronger that memory becomes?
Exactly. Like building a mental map with multiple routes to the same destination.
I love that analogy. So instead of just reading about something, I might try to visualize it, listen to a podcast on the topic,
Right.
or even build a model if it's something tangible.
Now you're getting it. And here's another fascinating twist. Even changing your physical study environment can have a big impact on your learning.
Wait, really? So my usual routine of holing up in the same spot every day might actually be hurting me.
It could be.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that, because I'm very much a creature of habit.
It's all about those connections our brains love to make. And they often link information to the environment where we learn it.
Oh, that's interesting.
So if you're always in the same place, studying those connections become very location specific.
Okay.
But if you mix it up a bit, study in different rooms, maybe even head outside to a coffee shop or a park,
Oh, I like that.
you're creating multiple retrieval cues for that information. It's like having backup copies of a file stored in different locations. That makes so much sense. Okay, so we're mixing up our study locations, but even with these techniques, there are times when motivation just dips, you know? We all hit a wall sometimes. Does Kaylan offer any advice on staying motivated?
Definitely. Motivation is key.
Right.
She really emphasizes the power of setting clear and meaningful goals.
Correct.
It's not enough to just say, I want to learn this. Ask yourself why. Why is this information important to you? What do you hope to achieve by learning it?
Because if it feels pointless, it's going to be so much harder to stick with it.
Exactly. Having that clarity of purpose can make all the difference when things get tough.
It's like anything else in life, right? You need that why to keep you going. And let's be real, even with the best intentions, sometimes our brains just get in the way.
Oh, absolutely. We live in a world of distractions.
It's so true. So how do we combat that? Is there anything in the book about dealing with distractions and that feeling of mental overload?
Kaylan talks about the Pomodoro technique. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I have. It's like those timed work sessions, right?
That's it. 25 minutes of focused work followed by a 5-minute break. And you repeat that cycle.
So even in our fast-paced world, we can still work with our brain's natural rhythms instead of against them.
Exactly. It's about finding that sustainable pace. And on that note, she also emphasizes 2 things that aren't directly related to studying but are absolutely crucial for brain power: exercise and sleep.
Right. It's all connected, isn't it?
It really is. We often think of physical and mental well-being as separate, but they're deeply intertwined.
So true. So tell me more about the connection between exercise, sleep, and learning.
Well, exercise is like giving your brain a boost of energy. It increases blood flow, which delivers vital oxygen and nutrients.
Oh, wow. So it's like fueling your brain for optimal performance.
Exactly. And then sleep. That's when the real magic happens. That's when your brain consolidates memories, moving them from short-term to long-term storage.
So skipping that workout or pulling an all-nighter is like shooting ourselves in the foot, even if we're putting in the hours of study time?
Exactly. You can't neglect those foundational aspects of health and expect your brain to function at its peak.
Makes perfect sense. And one last question before we wrap things up. We live in a world obsessed with speed and efficiency. So I have to ask, does Kaylan talk about the role of technology in all of this?
Absolutely. And she has a balanced perspective, which I appreciate. Technology can be an incredibly powerful tool, especially when it comes to things like spaced repetition apps,
Oh yeah, those are great.
digital note-taking, or accessing online learning platforms like Coursera.
So many incredible resources at our fingertips. But I imagine it's easy to get caught up in the novelty and forget that tech works best when it complements, not replaces those core techniques we've been discussing.
100%. No app can replace the power of active recall, multisensory learning, or good night's sleep.
So true. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the science of learning faster, there's one final thought from the book that's really sticking with me. What if instead of focusing solely on speed, we shifted our attention to actually enjoying the learning process?
I love that.
It's such a simple but profound idea.
It is. Because when we're genuinely engaged in enjoying the process, those neural pathways probably light up like fireworks.
Right. It becomes less about forcing ourselves and more about leaning into that natural curiosity and fascination.
Exactly. And that's what makes learning truly stick. That spark of joy and excitement.
So listeners, as you explore these science-backed methods, remember to savor the journey. Enjoy the process of discovery and watch your learning soar. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep those brains engaged and those learning adventures exciting.